everybody. Kevin McNulty here, and I'm joined with my good friend and colleague, John Bentley, for Beyond the Quotes. Beyond the Quotes is something, this is by the way, our first segment. We decided to do this because John and I, we speak on a weekly basis. We're always looking at ways to improve our understanding of our various skills and the things that we do. And we talk a lot about quotes. We pass on quotes to each other. And, not so long ago, we just got into this conversation about quotes themselves, that the power they have on us, or that they can have on us, except that we hear them so often that now they're almost just throwaways. And so we just had this conversation. Why don't we take quotes, create a video blog, and go beyond the quotes and kind of help folks process the quotes, if you will. I mean, it's not to suggest that people don't understand quotes, but to just take them a little bit deeper. So welcome, John. Good to be with you.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. It is such an honor to be with you and for us to start sharing with our listening audience and encouraging them to think more about how quotes can impact their lives. In fact, I'm so thankful that you provided our first quote today around perceptions, and you always share with me that perceptions are the foundation of how we operate our lives on a daily basis. Kevin, will you share a little bit more about that, and even maybe let's define perceptions for our listening audience before we move forward?
Okay, absolutely. So this is we could say it's a quote. I came up with it, oh God, maybe 30 years ago now, but it was really a principle more than a quote. So that, that perceptions are the foundation of how we operate on a daily basis. And it really came about in my work in human relations education and just getting really keyed in on this idea of how perceptions affect us, how they affect how we approach life, how we approach our work, how we approach each other, how we think about ourselves. So, there are a lot of different definitions out there. Of course, there are. If you look into it a little bit and kind of look back at the Latin, the Latin interpretation is the word is actually perceptio. And interesting enough, it talks about taken in, taken in something. And so, perceptions is just sort of an awareness, that you take into your mind through your various senses. And I'm talking about you perceive things by way of taste, by way of seeing things, by the way that we hear things, and we come to a conclusion. So we look at something, we sense it in one form or fashion, it comes into our mind, and then we make a conclusion about it. I'll say one more other thing that I read recently about perceptions, that the suggestion was that by default, and I haven't thought this through, but by default, that reality is, in a sense, an illusion, that there are only individual perceptions of reality. What do you think about that?
Well, you're reminding me, Kevin, that truth may be just my truth based on what I see and hear, that perceptions are normal. It's how we make sense of the world, yet I must determine whether what I'm seeing and hearing, feeling, or even smelling, is it just based on my experiences in the truth, or is it really reality?
Well, and that's the other thing that you run into, as you just suggested, when you start to study up just a little bit, just to read a little bit on perception, is understanding the difference between, what a belief is, versus what the truth is. And that because we believe something, or you could say it this way, because we perceive something, that it's not necessarily the truth. I mean, I think we all understand that, but we don't always operate that way.
I would agree with that, Kevin, because you're reminding me, and I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here with our listening audience. Growing up, I had taken on a belief, or my perception had become a belief, a truth, that I wasn't smart enough to be educated. So I put off college until my 50s. I finished my bachelor's and my master's degree in my 50s after having a successful Air Force career. So it took time for me to be able to say, John, you are worth it. You are smart. Look at what you've accomplished. Now go after that degree because it means a lot to you.
That's a very important point. And we've talked about this before. I had a similar experience growing up, that when I was graduating from high school, I thought a lot about college, but honestly, my perception was, my belief was that college was either for rich people or smart people. And frankly, I didn't fall into either one of those categories. And so as much as I literally thought about it and thought how cool it would be, I didn't think it was for me. I didn't perceive that was for me. So like you, I didn't finish my degrees until later on in life as well. And that brings me to this point, John. And that is, so just in a general sense, why is understanding the quote important, that perceptions are the foundation of how we operate our lives on a daily basis? Why is it important to understand perception?
Wow, Kevin, and thank you for sharing your quote with us. I think what comes to mind to me that perceptions are the catalyst for behavior, which is action. And if my perception is costing me something or something that I want to do but don't think I can, then I'm going to become a prisoner of that perception.
Wow.
Whereas if I take the time to say, what would be the payoff if I shifted my perception and was willing to take action so it could become a pioneer for my future? So it's either holding me back or it's propelling me forward. So for me, I literally have to step back and be objective or come to someone like you, as I've done before, and say, Kevin, here's what I'm thinking. And you give me good, honest feedback to help me process whether it's helping or hurting. And then I can take the appropriate action.
You know, that's a great point that we should throw out to our audience, and that is this concept of helping each other think. And you and I do that again on a very regular basis. I do this with my, my poor wife all the time. I'm always calling her and saying, Jane, can you help me think through this?
Mm.
And what we're saying to each other when we do that, you and I, or me doing it with Jane, is that we have a certain perception about something, but but we're asking the other person to help us think through that. And isn't that different than saying, what's your opinion about something, which is fine, but asking people to help you think through something. You and I have found this to be one of the most powerful practices. I believe, I'm speaking for myself, but I think you would agree, one of those powerful practices that anybody can put into play.
Well, it really is the key to thinking deeper and being willing to transition from a point of, I'll speak for me, for pain and even shame that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't good enough to have a college education, to people sharing with me like you've done and others that helped me challenge that thought process so that I'm willing to take action. And I do that because when I ask for their help versus just their opinion, it allows me to see their perspective and be able to move forward.
Yes. Allows us to see another perspective and allows the other perspective and the other person to help us think through our perception. So one of the sort of the initiating phrases might be something like, when you and I work together, and you and I both belong to various mastermind groups, and we do the same thing in smaller groups. So it might be something along the lines of, John, here's what I'm thinking. Help me think through that. And I'm really saying, here's what I'm perceiving. Because what you and I have really come to know through our work and our studies and whatever is the concept that perceptions are the foundation of how we operate our lives. Right. And so if we perceive something and therefore believe something, then that propels us forward. Perceptions, they shape how we think, they shape how we interact with the world, they shape how we understand our own lives, as you had just articulated. And so therefore, it shapes then how we behave. I'd like to, if I may, just bring up one fairly recent situation that took place that you and I have talked about, but has clearly had a profound effect on our perceptions, or profound. I can't think of the right word. That helping us. It was all around this concept of perceptions and how it deals with the way that we think about the attitude and about our beliefs and about we what. And that was the situation in Washington.
Right.
It's been a few weeks now where uh, a Native American came upon some teenagers. Now, there's a whole backstory in that, but I'm just going to bring it out in this way. What I was, the way my perception was shaped was I picked it up on, I don't know, was it Facebook or Twitter or just some online magazine or something, whatever it was. But the headline was something to the effect of um, young teenage, MAGA something hat wearing person smirks at a Native American. And that's the headline that I saw. And so when I clicked on the video, I remember my first thought or my first perception was, wow, he is smirking at him. And so, but again, having been in this business long enough, I did finally get to the point. I only saw a short clip at first, but I remember after watching it saying to myself, okay, what's the rest of the story? Don't get hooked into that headline because we know what happens with headlines and what the real stories are. So in any event, everybody knows, what the fallout was, that there was a whole different perception about that if you were to watch the entire video. But here's my point, John. Had somebody came up to me, if you'd have came up to me and said, hey, Kevin, check this out, and I saw no headline and you just showed me a picture, or even clicked the video and I watched it, I might have said, wow, that's a beautiful thing. This young teenage boy and this this Native American elder, they're having a beautiful moment. You see, but what the perception that we had based on the headline led us to think and then behave in certain ways.
Well, it certainly ties right back to your quote again about perceptions being the foundation of how we operate our lives on a daily basis. So someone took a snippet in time,
Yes.
just that one frame, and pitched it to the world that this young man's being disrespectful to the Native American elder.
Yeah.
Now, as we find more information about it, we come to understand that that was not necessarily the truth in that situation. And I think it goes back to the point that you just shared with our listening audience is the perception is normal in that case.
Yes.
Is it the truth?
Just very well said. And I appreciate that you put that in there because, and I might say, I'm not trying to state one way or the other what was right or wrong. I mean, again, everybody takes away their own conclusions, but to your point, perceptions are relatively normal. They're normal, but they generate conclusions, and then we act on those conclusions. So what you just said now leads me to ask you this question. So then, relative to this quote, that perceptions are the foundation of how we operate our lives on a daily basis, how do we use this quote? How do we put this quote or this idea of perceptions into play, into practice, if you will?
Right. And we've discussed it just a little bit now. And for me is the question I always ask about a situation when I have a negative reaction to something is where I use it is what else may be true. And when the blood's flowing in my head and I'm operating optimally, sometimes that's easy to do. But when things aren't going well, that's when it's more difficult for me. So you shared with me the most important thing about asking questions to ourselves or to you to help me is that what else may be true helps me seek clarity, Kevin, clarity. I think the opposite is true too. If I continue doing something that's been a payoff, maybe I also say what else may be true about this so I can get better at it. So it's that world of dichotomies that you share with us that help us shape our perceptions so that we operate our lives more successfully is what I've taken from you, Kevin.
Well, interesting that you bring up this whole word of dichotomies, and this is the truth that we do often split things, that they turn into something that's black or white. And it doesn't matter what the scenario is, though, that perceptually, maybe we do come to a conclusion, but to your point, yeah, what else might be true? You know, what is the full story?
Yes.
Is there another perspective about that, about a situation or about what you're thinking? And this is what probably going beyond the quote is first of all, is the component of self-awareness. First of all, understanding that simply because we perceive something does not make it true. And therefore, to the point you just made, you can simply ask questions. Am I seeing the truth, or am I seeing the full story? Or is there more information that I need to know to make a decision or to come to a better conclusion? I mean, think about if you're trying to, let's just say that, John, I ask you, what is your purpose in life?
And for me, it's using my God-given talents to serve others and to make the world a better place.
And I love that. And you've always been very clear about that. But that conclusion is, in fact, based on a perception, isn't it?
Amen. Amen. So what you're reminding me of, Kevin, is understanding what facts we saw to cause our perception to draw my conclusion.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
You know, I know we've discussed one time that I worked for someone and I did respect them, and all of a sudden they started checking up on my work continuously. And I became frustrated. So the fact is, they checked up on my work continuously as a conclusion, probably 3 times a day on a report in a 1-week period that was due on Friday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they checked up on me 3 times. I became frustrated because I said I'm being micromanaged or they don't trust me. So I drew a conclusion of micromanaged, they don't trust me, from being checked up on 3 times in 3 days in a row.
Wow.
So once I understood the fact and how I drew the conclusion, I was able to have a conversation with the individual. And it's amazing what I discovered. This was a very high visibility project that I was unaware of. This individual was feeling pressure, and they were allowing the pressure to cause them to behave in ways that weren't the norm. So we had that dialogue, and it helped me understand the importance of it, which let me really focus on my work and get the product out on time for him.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And again, I love what you always say. You always, talk about the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think about that a lot because, I may look at something, have a perception about it, and then that begins the story. My perception is that this person, so I look at somebody, I'm making this up now. Let's just say I'm having a conversation with somebody. It's a little tense, and I see them roll their eyes. My perception is that they were, could be anything from belittling me or dismissing me or thinking what I said was stupid. And so there begins the story, that I could walk away from that situation and build a story that could, win an Oscar nomination. I mean, you see what I'm saying? So I want to put these maybe in a couple of small steps relative to perceptions and how they, and because they are the foundation of how we operate our lives, why they're important, that they are important, that we discern and be clearer about our perceptions of things. Right. So step 1 is self-awareness, right? Most people know this, John, that, perceptions are perceptions. They may be real, they may not, but we don't always operate that way. So it's a very complex process, perceiving something and conclusions that we make. So the first step is being aware that our perceptions are just that. So step 1 is the self-awareness piece, understanding perceptions are just what they are. And step 2 is, maybe you could put these together, asking questions and just seeking clarity. What is, what is the full story, if you want to put it that way? Because I don't want to say what is the truth. That's elusive. But what is the bigger story? What's the fuller story? What's the information that I need?
I, I, I like that you're reminding me of the importance of being able to walk my thought process backwards. That here was, especially if you can do it, especially if I can do it before I take an action. So going back to the gentleman that checked up on me 3 times in 3 days, what I really wanted to do was go in there and give him a piece of my mind and let him know I was tired of this, or find another job. Fortunately, I was able to say, wait a minute, before you take that action, why are you here? And then I backed up to my story. So now I'm seeking the clarity. And my story is, you're micromanaging me, you don't trust me. Okay, why did I draw that conclusion? And then once I understood those facts, I was able to say, why is this individual behaving this way? Why am I seeing and hearing this and drawing this conclusion? Go ask.
I love that, John. That really clarifies a very specific situation that can be applied to everything. And in the meantime, what I'm also hearing that you did is that you slowed down the process. You slowed down the event, or whereas what often happens is, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times, hopefully I don't do it as much anymore, that I'm in a hurry, I'm stressed out, I'm behind somebody and they're poking along, and I get frustrated and might even say a choice word or two, and then I zip around them to find, it's a 90-year-old man who's just trying to get to where they're going, and I go, Kevin, come on, but that's what happens. You see something and you get emotional because of things going on in your head, and don't do what you just said.
Well,
it's process down.
It's taken me a lot of practice and repetition to do that. Imagine had I not done that and I had acted on my thoughts of what might that have done to mine and his relationship, or might I have found another job and been less happy just because I thought that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and I hope our listening audience, is before you take an action, stop and determine, is it going to be a payoff and be helpful to you and others, or is it actually going to be a cost and be hurtful to you and others? And that just takes time to practice, because it is a learned skill.
That's right. That's right. That's a powerful point that you're making right there, that you don't just have to live with, let's just say, your mindset or the perceptions that you have, but that, and many people know this, that that the brain, it can rework itself.
Amen.
It's not like our bones and the rest of our body that stops growing, that our brain actually can continue to grow and continue to be flexible in how even down to our emotions. I mean, emotional intelligence is, there's been lots of studies, and they talk about that your emotional intelligence can be reworked, can be improved upon. And so, to your point, that the development of being more keen, I guess you could say, with your perceptions is a skill. It's something that you can work on and improve. So
yeah, you're kind of reminding me of, do I react or do I respond? A thermometer only reacts to the temperature. It gets hotter, it gets colder, but a thermostat takes in information and then regulates the situation. So I liken it to that. And there's going to be times where I'm going to be, let me just say, things aren't going well during that day for whatever reason.
Right.
And my ability to challenge my perceptions will drop. So just know it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about being willing to say, you know what, I am worth stopping and understanding my thinking and how it's allowing me to, how it's causing me to behave. And in this case, it was not well. Now, I used to beat myself up about that. Again, that's a perception in itself.
Sure, absolutely.
Don't do that, because you're worth becoming the best you. And the only person that can take charge of being the best you is you. And I'm fortunate to have you, Kevin, as a friend that I can come and ask you to help me think through something, and you help me challenge my thought process. So I want to thank you for making me better.
Well, I can echo the same. We have been having conversations and mastermind sessions and just great, dialogue for many, many years. And I I echo your sentiments about you. We have been that source of iron sharpening iron, and with that, uh, I would encourage other people to do these sorts of things, to get people around them, particularly, let's just say, on a professional level, but it applies on a personal level just as well. But
Yeah.
in a professional sense, to get a person or two or three that you can interact with on a regular basis, folks that will openly and honestly challenge your thinking. And more to your point, that you can go to these people and simply say, help me think through this.
Amen.
It's a
Amen.
powerful thing to do. John, I got to be honest with you. This is a subject that we could go on for days with. Honestly, it really is in so many ways complex. There's a lot of things that 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 go into this topic of perceptions and mindsets and attitudes and emotions. But my perception is that we ought to close here for now, um, and look forward to the next week. We won't share ahead of time what the quote will be. We hope that people will come and listen and find out what the quote is.
Mm-hmm.
But as we close, I'd like to just ask our audience listen, if you have a quote that you come across or a quote that you use a lot, would you send it to us? You can send it to us by way of LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you can find us. You will see our websites and our email addresses here when we close. And we'd love to take on whatever quotes you have and try to put them in practical terms that help folks go beyond the quote.
Absolutely, Kevin. So I'll challenge our listeners and encourage them at the same time to challenge your perceptions. And you do that by asking questions to seek clarity. And then that allow you to shift your thinking and behave differently. Because I tell you again, listening audience, you are worth it. You are worth it. So as Kevin said, down below will be our contact information. Kevin, I'll turn it over to you to close us out, sir.
Well, again, we hope this is our first. We hope to we will continue on with various quotes, doing this once a week, and just would love for you to share this video blog with whoever that you think might be helpful. And this is really terrific. I enjoyed it a lot, John. I enjoy having our viewing audience, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week for Beyond the Quotes.